That day, my boss Theodore Hayes slammed a stack of falsified spreadsheets down on my desk. The impact sent a handful of paper clips skittering across the oak surface, and the sharp, angry sound cut through the low hum of the office air conditioner like a blade. He expected me to bow my head, cave in, and become another silent link in his chain of greed, just like everyone else who'd ever worked under him at Viridian Tech. He was dead wrong. Right there, across from his imposing leather desk, I kept my face neutral even as my pulse hammered in my ears. I reached into my slacks pocket, my fingers closing around the warm glass of my phone, and pressed a button he never in a million years would have guessed was already active. Then I lifted my gaze, held his eyes, and watched as that smug, all-controlling expression on his face, the one he wore every time he doled out orders and expected them obeyed, cracked like fragile crystal. Fine lines spiderwebbed across his features in an instant, and then the whole facade shattered completely, silent but devastating, like a pane of glass hit by a bullet. "Liam, you'll adjust the quarterly reports to match these numbers." My direct superior, Theodore Hayes, CFO of Viridian Tech, pushed a crumpled sheet of handwritten notes across my desk. His finger tapped twice against the paper, producing dull, heavy clicks that seemed to echo in the closed room. We were alone in his office. The air conditioning ran cold enough to see your breath, yet a fine sheen of sweat broke out across my back before I even picked up the page. I lifted the sheet and scanned it once, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. The numbers on that page bore almost no resemblance to the actual revenue, costs, and profits logged in our system. Reported income was inflated by nearly 30%, and several critical expense entries had been erased entirely. This wasn't polishing or massaging the figures. This was barefaced fraud, and the dollar amounts were staggering. "Mr. Hayes," I lifted my head, my throat dry. "These numbers are way off. They don't line up with actual operations at all. Especially that Horizon Consulting service fee. We have the full contract and payment records on file. We can't just wipe it out." Hayes leaned back in his oversized leather executive chair, twirling a Montblanc pen between his fingers, slow and lazy, and watched me with that familiar, patronizing half-smile. "Liam, you've been with the company 5 years now, right? Climbed from staff accountant to manager. How do you think I've treated you all this time?" My chest tightened. I knew the emotional manipulation was coming. "You've always looked out for me, sir." "I appreciate it." "Good. Then we understand each other." He leaned forward, voice dropping to a low, unassailable rumble that carried all the weight of his authority. "The company needs strong numbers this quarter. We have a board to impress, investors to reassure. That Horizon account? It covers sensitive matters. It needs to disappear. You do this, you make this quarter's profit shine, and I'll personally sign off on an exceptional performance review for you. Double bonus. And the deputy director spot in finance next year? It's not out of the question." He laid out a big, perfect promise, so tempting I could almost taste it. Double bonus. Deputy director. The words hooked into me, sharp and heavy. My mortgage, my car payment, my dad's medical bills, my sister's tuition for next semester, all those crushing, real-life pressures pressed in, threatening to overwhelm my judgment. I gripped that thin sheet of paper until my fingertips whitened. Silence stretched across the office, broken only by the faint whir of the air vent. The smile slowly faded from Hayes' face, replaced by a cold, assessing stare. "Trouble?" His tone cooled sharply. "Liam, let's be clear. You're not the only manager in this department. Wade King has had his eye on your spot for months. He'd do this. He wouldn't ask a single question. Wade was my second in command, and one of Hayes' most loyal yes-men. He was terrible at actual accounting, but brilliant at flattering his superiors and handling Hayes' personal business. So the carrot hadn't worked. Now came the stick. I took a slow, deep breath and set the sheet of paper gently back on his desk, keeping my voice as steady as I could. "It's not trouble, sir. It's that I can't do this." I looked him dead in the eye, every word deliberate. "This is fraud. It's illegal. The IRS isn't blind, and the auditors aren't idiots. If this blows up, I'm the one who signs off. I'm the one who goes to prison." No matter how big the promise is, I can't enjoy it from a jail cell. A muscle twitched visibly in Hayes' jaw. He clearly hadn't expected this. The quiet, hard-working subordinate who never complained, who always kept his head down and got the work done, he'd expected me to fold. He'd certainly never expected me to say it out loud, blunt and unvarnished. Illegal. He let out a sharp, mocking laugh, like I'd told the stupidest joke he'd ever heard. Liam, you're so naive. You think law matters in here? In this building? I am the law. I tell you to do it, you do it. If anything goes wrong, I'll handle it. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about it. He stood up, towering over me from across the desk, every inch the arrogant, long-entrenched executive. Let me make this perfectly clear. You will do these books. You will do them tomorrow morning, and you will leave the finished reports on my desk before 9 a.m. If you don't. He paused, his mouth twisting into a cold, cruel smirk. You can kiss this manager title goodbye. You can kiss your career at Viridian goodbye. I'll have you walked out for gross incompetence, unfit for finance work. With that on your record, and my word in this industry, good luck finding another job anywhere in this city. Fired. Walked out. Career ruined. Every word landed like a hammer blow to my chest, driving the blood from my head until my ears rang. I stared at his face, twisted with anger and absolute certainty that he held my whole life in his hands. I stared at that lavish, suffocating corner office, and 5 years of late nights, careful work, and quiet dedication flashed through my mind in a single rush. Was it worth it? To throw all that away over some silly sense of ethics, over a conscience? I didn't know if it was worth it. But I knew this. If I nodded, if I signed those reports, I would never sleep again for the rest of my life. My dad had always told me, there are lines you don't cross. Step over them once, and you can never step back. My hand slipped quietly into my pants pocket. My phone screen was warm under my fingers, the call still running. I lifted my chin and met Hayes' glare head-on. I didn't look away. I even straightened my shoulders, which had hunched a little under the pressure. Then I spoke, in a voice so calm I barely recognized it myself. Mr. Hayes, did you just say that you are the law around here? Hayes clearly thought I was finally caving. A smug little smirk tugged at his mouth, and he huffed. Took you long enough to see sense. I shook my head. Beneath his rapidly confusion, I slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket, lit up the screen, and turned it to face him. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a photo. It was an active voice call screen. The call timer ran exactly as long as our conversation had lasted. At the top of the screen, in small, bright red lettering, was the meeting label, company-wide all hands. I watched his face lock up. I watched his pupils blow wide. I watched the color drain from his cheeks so fast I could almost see it happen. Then I tapped the speakerphone button. A voice, slightly crackling with static, but unmistakable, loud and clear, boomed out of the phone's speaker and filled the suddenly dead silent office. It was Hayes' own voice, from barely 2 minutes earlier, arrogant and unyielding. I tell you to do it, you do it. If anything goes wrong, I'll handle it. Otherwise, you can kiss this manager title goodbye. You can kiss your career at Viridian goodbye. Time itself seemed to freeze the second I hit speakerphone. Or rather, Hayes froze. That twisted mix of threat, smugness, and absolute authority was still painted across his features, but underneath it, his whole face went white with a shock so raw it was almost physical. His eyes bulged, nearly popping out of his skull, fixed on that call screen, on those 3 words company-wide all hands, like he was staring at a ghost come to drag him to hell. His mouth hung open. A ragged, wheezing sound tore out of his throat, like air leaking from a broken bellows, but he couldn't form a single coherent word. The man who'd held my career in his palm barely a minute ago now stood like a wax figure with its soul sucked out. Only the faint, violent trembling of his fingers betrayed the tidal wave of terror and ruin crashing through him. You. He worked his jaw uselessly, finally squeezing out a broken syllable. He lifted a shaking finger, pointing first at me, then at the phone, trembling so hard he looked like he had palsy. I calmly took the phone back and turned off the speaker, but left the call running. Mr. Hayes, my voice was low, almost flat, but it cut through the dead silence like a knife. I forgot to mention. Before I came in, I was on a call with Linda and admin, confirming the all-hands meeting agenda for this afternoon. I never hung up. Accidentally hit convert to conference call and accidentally pulled in every department's online meeting room across the whole company. I paused, watching his face shift from pale to ashen gray. So that whole speech you just gave about faking the books, inflating profits, promoting me if I play along, firing me if I don't, and that memorable line about how you're the law around here? I even gave him a thin, cold little smile. I think everyone heard it. Marketing, engineering, operations, admin, even the board members in the top floor conference room. Anyone connected to the company network anyway. Oh, and one more thing. I nodded toward a small, unassuming device in the corner of his office, its little red status light blinking steadily. Your Office Cloud conference system? I'm pretty sure it defaults to the company-wide meeting link. Which means there's probably a high-definition recording of this whole conversation backed up on the server. Thud. Hayes' legs gave out. Not acting. He genuinely collapsed backward into that expensive chair of his heavy frame slamming into the leather with a groan of strained springs. The chair slid half a meter backward and slammed into the bookshelf behind him, sending several hardcover books crashing to the floor. All the color was gone from his face. His lips were a horrifying bluish purple. Beads of sweat popped out across his forehead and nose instantly. His eyes were glazed, hollow, nothing left in them but raw, bottomless fear and despair. No way, you're lying. Liam, you son of a bitch, you set me up. He jolted like he'd woken from a nightmare, letting out a wild, animal snarl. He tried to stand, but his limbs wouldn't cooperate. He just twisted uselessly in the chair. Set you up. I shook my head and carefully slipped my phone back into my pocket. Let's not call it that, sir. I just accidentally gave the whole company a front row seat to learn what makes a qualified team player CFO. Very educational. You taught it well. Just then, there was a knock at the office door. It wasn't loud. It was steady, rhythmic, cold, and official. Mr. Hayes? Open up, please. Board Secretariat, Claire Sutton. A woman's steady, completely emotionless voice carried through the door. Hayes jolted like the voice had burned him. The despair on his face deepened into ruin. Board Secretariat? They were here already? That meant the board had heard every word. That meant they'd already moved. He snapped his head toward me, eyes swimming with venom, terror, and one last flicker of desperate pleading. I ignored him. I smoothed down the front of my shirt, which I'd crumpled in my grip during the confrontation, walked over and calmly pulled the office door open. 3 people stood in the hallway. At the front was a woman in her mid-40s in a tailored blazer and skirt, her face set in serious lines, Claire Sutton, secretary to the board of directors. Behind her stood 2 tall, suited men from corporate security, their faces just as tight. Claire's gaze flickered over me for a heartbeat, complex and unreadable, then slid past me straight to Hayes, slumped in his chair and gray as a corpse. Theodore Hayes, her voice was ice, flat and official. Following reports from multiple directors and employees, you are suspected of severe violations of company policy and state law, including directing subordinates to commit financial fraud. By emergency authorization of the board of directors, you are hereby suspended from all duties effective immediately and will cooperate fully with the investigation. Please come with us. You will explain the conversation that took place in this office and all related financial matters to the audit committee and the board. The 2 security men stepped forward immediately, flanking Hayes' chair. They didn't touch him, but their posture said everything. The last of the strength drained out of Hayes. He slumped back in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling, muttering under his breath over and over, "It's over. It's all over." Only then did Claire turn back to me, her tone softening the tiniest bit, but still perfectly formal. "Manager Carter, you'll come with us as well. We'll need your full statement and any supporting evidence." I nodded. "Of course, Miss Sutton. I'll cooperate fully." As we walked out of the CFO's suite, the main finance floor was eerily silent. Dozens of my coworkers had all but stopped working. Every eye turned toward our little procession. I saw shock, disbelief, quiet glee, confusion, fear, and evasion in those gazes. I saw Wade King standing by his desk, nearly as pale as Hayes. He couldn't meet my eyes. He was trembling. Hayes had named him outright. After all, said Wade would do the job and never ask questions. The guy looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. I didn't look at anyone. I just walked calmly behind Claire, through that uncanny silence. But I knew. From that moment on, I hadn't just canceled Theodore Hayes socially across the whole company. I'd stepped out of the shadows myself, straight into an unpredictable spotlight full of scrutiny and risk. The walk to the boardroom was short, but it felt like miles. With every step, I could feel dozens of unreadable eyes on my back. I had no idea what waited for me on the other side. Praise for my honesty and courage? Or resentment for rocking the boat, for dragging the company's dirty laundry into the open and creating a scandal? Hayes was finished, but he hadn't sat in that CFO chair for all those years without a bigger network behind him. How big of a hornet's nest had I kicked? And what would the board, those shrewd, experienced men and women, think of the low-level manager who'd blown everything up with such a brutal, public move? At the boardroom door, Claire paused. She glanced at me out of the corner of her eye and said, low and meaningful, Manager Carter. Courage is a fine thing in a young man. But next time, perhaps a more measured approach would be wiser. My stomach sank. The small boardroom felt airless, like the pressure had been cranked up until you could barely breathe. The head of the long conference table was empty. 7 or 8 people sat along the sides, several directors I'd only ever seen in the annual report, the head of the audit committee, and one stern-faced man I didn't recognize. Later I learned he was a special investigator sent from corporate headquarters. Hayes was seated alone near the door, slumped over like a sack of potatoes, his head hanging. All the arrogance he'd had that morning was gone, replaced by utter defeat and terror. 2 security guards stood a short distance behind him. I was directed to sit across from him, the wide table between us like a battle line. After Claire gave a brief summary, the special investigator took over the questioning. Manager Carter, please recount in detail everything that happened in Mr. Hayes' office this morning, from the moment you entered until we arrived. His voice was flat, completely neutral. I steadied myself and walked through it all, step by step, the call from Hayes' line, the handwritten numbers, the promises of promotion and bonus, the threats of termination, his exact words, I am the law, you will do it, or you're finished. I stuck as close to the original wording as I could, no editorializing. As I spoke, the directors' faces grew darker and darker. Especially Daniel Moore, the audit lead director known for his strictness. His brow was knotted so tight it looked painful. When I got to the part about accidentally turning my admin call into a company-wide broadcast, there were several quiet, sharp intakes of breath around the table. Every eye turned back to me, heavier this time, sharper with curiosity. Accident? Or deliberate? Nobody asked out loud, but the question hung thick in the room. Hayes suddenly jolted upright, eyes bloodshot, and snarled at me. He's lying. He set me up. He recorded me on purpose. He staged that whole broadcast. This is entrapment. This is retaliation because I held him to high standards. The investigator gave him a cold, withering look. Control yourself, Mr. Hayes. We are verifying facts, not listening to accusations. We will look into whether Manager Carter set you up. But did you say those words? Did you hand him that sheet of altered figures? Hayes looked like he'd been grabbed by the throat. His face went purple. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The words were undeniably his. The handwriting on that sheet would stand up to any test. I lost my head for a minute. I was thinking of the company. It was temporary. He scrabbled for any defense, any excuse. And fraud? As CFO, I would never actually make him commit fraud. I was testing him. Yes, testing his professional ethics. Liam, you disappoint me. You'd resort to such cheap, underhanded tactics. Testing. Director Moore finally snapped, slamming a palm down on the table so hard the water glasses rattled. Theodore Hayes, you test a man's ethics with tens of millions in falsified data? You say I am the law and do it or you're fired in front of hundreds of employees as a test. Do you take this board for fools? Or do you take the law for a joke? Director Moore's fury dropped the temperature in the room 10 degrees. Hayes went ashen and crumpled back into his seat, completely deflated. The investigator ignored him and turned back to me. Manager Carter, beyond your statement and that accidental public audio, do you have any other evidence? For example, the handwritten sheet Mr. Hayes gave you. I do. I nodded, pulled the original sheet from my folder, stood, and handed it to the investigator with both hands. The original is here. Also, regarding that Horizon Consulting fee he wanted erased and other possible irregularities from Mr. Hayes' tenure, over time, in the course of my work, I came across a few things. I compiled them. I pulled a thin silver USB drive from my folder and set it on the table. It contains unusual payment records within my access level, copies of approval signatures, and side-by-side comparisons of key contract terms. I can't confirm their nature definitively, but I believed they warranted further review by internal audit. That changed everything. Even the investigator and Director Moore looked startled. They stared at me, then at the tiny silver drive, then back to my face. If the broadcast could still be dismissed as a young man's impulsive accident, this pre-prepared, targeted package of evidence left no doubt. I hadn't reacted in the heat of the moment. I'd been collecting proof. I'd been waiting. And when the moment came, I'd struck. Hayes' head snapped up. He stared at that USB drive with such raw venom it might as well have been poison. He finally understood, completely, that I hadn't been helpless meat on his chopping block from the second I walked through his door. Maybe even long before. Director Moore picked up the drive, turned it over in his hand, and asked in a low voice, "When did you start collecting this? Why didn't you report it to audit sooner?" I was silent for 2 beats, then answered carefully. About 6 months ago. I was reconciling some old contracts and noticed a few things that didn't add up. But I had no hard proof and I didn't know who to report it to. Mr. Hayes was the head of the department. So I just kept my eyes open, made notes. Today, when he explicitly ordered me to falsify records and admitted the Horizon account was problematic, I knew it was time to bring everything forward. It was a careful answer. It explained the delay, and it made sense. When your own boss is the problem, you don't just waltz into HR with a list of suspicions. Fear, hesitation, quiet evidence gathering, waiting for a safe moment, that's exactly how most people in my position would react. It was believable. The investigator and Director Moore exchanged a look and didn't press further. The rest of the questioning turned to Hayes. Faced with mounting details, and with the partial but damning leads on my USB drive, his story fell apart. He contradicted himself constantly. His excuses crumbled. The meeting ran all afternoon. In the end, after preliminary verification of the audio, the handwriting, and the direction of the evidence on the drive, the board handed down 4 immediate emergency resolutions. First, Theodore Hayes was immediately suspended from all duties as CFO. A joint team from Group Audit and the Special Investigation Unit would take over and conduct a full review of all financial transactions and approvals during his tenure. Second, day-to-day finance operations would be temporarily overseen by a senior accountant from the Audit Committee under direct reporting to the VP. Third, Liam Carter was temporarily relieved of his manager duties with pay to assist with the investigation. He was to remain in the city and be available for questioning at any time until the investigation concluded. Fourth, the PR department was directed to immediately manage internal and external reputational risk from the broadcast incident. I handed over my badge. My system access was temporarily frozen. When I walked out of that suffocating boardroom, dusk had already fallen. The hallway was empty. Only my footsteps echoed back at me. I didn't feel relieved. I felt heavier, more exhausted, more adrift than before. Hayes was gone. On paper, I'd won. But my job was on hold. My future was uncertain. I'd used the most extreme method possible to yank the lid off a very ugly secret, and I'd laid the company's dirtiest laundry bare for everyone to see. What would the board think of the troublemaker? Admire my integrity? Or fear my ruthlessness? And what would my coworkers think? See me as a hero who took down a crook? Or a calculating, dangerous subordinate who'd turn on his own boss? I walked to the finance floor entrance. The lights were on inside, but it was dead quiet. When I appeared, nearly everyone looked up. Their gazes were complicated. Wade's desk was already empty. Word was he'd been taken in for questioning that afternoon, too. I went to my desk and quietly packed up my things: a few potted plants, a thermos, some textbooks, odds and ends. Nobody came over to talk. Even the coworkers I'd gotten along with reasonably well just watched from a distance, concerned, curious, but mostly hesitant, keeping their distance. I understood. Nobody knew which way the wind would blow. Getting too close to me was a risk. I picked up my not very heavy box, took one last look at the desk I'd sat at for 5 years, and turned to leave. The elevator descended slowly from the top floor. The metal doors reflected my blurry face. I looked calm. But only I knew that under the calm was the hollow exhaustion after a storm and a deep, gnawing uncertainty about what came next. Ding. First floor. The doors slid open. I carried my box out through the grand revolving doors of the company lobby and into the open air. Cold early winter wind hit me full in the face and made me shiver. I stood on the steps in front of the building, watching the streetlights flicker on and the cars stream by, and for a long moment I had no idea where to go. Then my phone buzzed once. A text from an unknown number, short and to the point. Mr. Carter. This is Mia Bennett, Internal Audit. Meet me at Slow Time Cafe on the corner tomorrow, 9 a.m. Need to speak privately about Theodore Hayes. Do not reply. Mia Bennett. I recognize the name. The new audit director, brought in not long ago. People said she had powerful connections and a reputation for being tough as nails. Hayes had mentioned her a few times, his voice edged with wariness. She wanted to see me. Privately. About Hayes. I stared at that text, and my heart picked up speed, hard and fast in my chest. Had that USB drive and that afternoon's broadcast only been the first domino? Had the real storm barely even started? At 8:50 the next morning, I was 10 minutes early to Slow Time Cafe. I took the most secluded booth in the back, screened by potted plants. I ordered an Americano, black, no sugar, no cream. I needed the bitterness to keep my head clear. At exactly 9 o'clock, a woman in a cream cashmere coat and light gray scarf pushed through the door. She looked to be in her mid-30s, polished makeup, sharp eyes. She scanned the room once and headed straight for my table. Liam? She sat down across from me. Her voice was low, crisp, and carried authority. Good morning, Miss Bennett. I nodded. She had a presence about her, quiet authority, not the loud bullying of Theodore Hayes, but a sharp, examining pressure that came with real expertise. Mia, please. This isn't a formal meeting. She slipped off her coat, flagged down the server for a latte, then turned to me with no pleasantries whatsoever. Your performance in the boardroom yesterday took me by surprise. I sipped my bitter coffee and said nothing. I waited. Especially the flash drive. Mia leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. The material in there is interesting. Fragmented, but the direction is very clear. How long were you sitting on it? On and off, about 6 months. I told the truth. There was no point in playing games with a career auditor. 6 months, she nodded thoughtfully. So you suspected Hayes long before yesterday. Why blow it up the way you did? In such a public fashion. It was a pointed question, loaded with scrutiny. I set my cup down and chose my words carefully. It wasn't a planned choice for yesterday specifically. He backed me into a corner. The fraud he was demanding was massive, felony-level falsification. If I did it, I'm an accomplice, facing prison time and the end of my career. If I refused, he'd fire me immediately, blackball me across the industry as incompetent. He left me with no good options. I paused and met her eyes directly. As for the public way, Mia, if you were in my shoes, a mid-level manager staring down a CFO openly demanding illegal action, with no clear way to report it safely, what would you do? Wait for formal channels? I'd have been laid off for underperformance before my report landed on anyone's desk. Negotiate privately? I had zero leverage. I only had one shot. Either he crushes me, or I go all in. I chose to fight back. It was messy, it was loud, but it worked. Mia listened in silence, her fingers brushing the rim of her coffee cup in a slow, unconscious rhythm. She didn't call it right or wrong. She just asked, "Did you ever stop to think you'd completely burned your bridges at Viridian? The board might admire your nerve, but they're far more likely to see you as a loose cannon. No executive wants a subordinate who's willing to blow everything up like that." I thought about it, I admitted freely. But I didn't have a choice. An uncertain future beats immediate ruin. And besides, I have to believe at least some people on this board actually care about this company, not just covering up for crooks like Hayes. My methods were extreme, but the leads I brought forward have value, real value, for rooting out corruption. A valuable employee with a sharp edge or a compliant executive rotting the company from the inside. I think the directors can do the math. I said it evenly, no defiance, no apology. I acknowledged the risk, I stated my value, and I framed it as good for the company. Mia watched me for a good 10 seconds. Then the corner of her mouth tugged upward in the faintest, most subtle flicker of approval. "You're sharp. And braver than most." She took a sip of her latte. "You're right about one thing. That flash drive of yours and yesterday's little broadcast dropped like a bomb in still water. Hayes is just the front man. There's a much bigger network behind him, procurement, sales, even people higher up. This goes way beyond cooked books." My heart jumped hard. "You mean procurement fraud, kickbacks on vendor contracts, slush funds run through shell companies?" Her voice dropped even lower, her eyes sharp as blades. "Hayes used his position as CFO to launder the money, cover the trails, and they protected him in return. For years, project margins have been off, procurement costs are inflated, even some of those failed investments. There's a hand in all of it. But they're careful. Hayes is the fall guy, the firewall." A cold chill ran down my spine. I'd thought it was just Hayes lining his own pockets, fudging a few expenses. I had no idea it ran this deep, an entire internal corruption ring. Does the board know? They've suspected it. No proof. What you did yesterday tore a hole right through their firewall. She looked me dead in the eye. Now that Hayes is sidelined, the people behind him are panicking. They'll do anything to cover their tracks, distance themselves from Hayes, silence him if they have to, or pin everything on him alone. Silence him. My chest tightened. That's why you're in danger, Liam. Her tone turned serious. You lit the fuse. They can't get to Hayes while he's under watch, but you? A suspended manager with no allies on paper? There are 100 ways to take you out. Accidents, character assassination, planted evidence to frame you, all of it. The chill crawled all the way up my spine. The numb exhaustion I'd felt yesterday sharpened into cold, sharp alarm. I'd only wanted to protect myself, to take down Hayes. I'd had no idea I'd stepped into something so much bigger, or that I'd marked myself for removal. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked her quietly. It was her job to investigate. She had no reason to meet me privately, no reason to lay all this out. Mia was quiet for a moment, weighing her words, then said, 2 reasons. First, I've reviewed your file, 5 years of solid work, clean record, consistent performance reviews. You're good at what you do, and you have integrity. This company needs people like you, especially in finance. I don't want to see a good career destroyed because you stumbled into a hornet's nest. Second, her gaze burned bright. We need more evidence to tear this whole network apart, to catch the people at the top. Hayes is scared, but he won't talk easily, and he doesn't know everything anyway. But you've been in finance for years, you've seen the raw data, the day-to-day processes. Those little clues you found? You might not even realize how valuable they are. We need your help to put it all together, systematically. She sat up straighter, her voice formal now. Liam, I'm reaching out on behalf of the Special Investigation Team, unofficially. Would you be willing to assist us with the rest of this? We'll do everything we can to keep you safe. There's risk, but it's also your best way out of this. The only way you're truly safe, is if we uproot every last one of them. Otherwise, even with Hayes gone, the people above him will find a way to make you pay, sooner or later. I fell silent. My coffee was cold now. The bitterness lingered on my tongue. Say yes, and I throw myself willingly into an even more dangerous fight, going up against hidden powers deep in the company. Say no, and like Mia said, I'd be looking over my shoulder forever, waiting for the accident, waiting for the retaliation, waiting for my career to be quietly killed. It wasn't really a choice. It was a narrow bridge I had to cross all the way to the end. I lifted my head and asked her one last question. How do I know I can trust you? Or the investigation team? How do I know this won't end with a few scapegoats and the real problems buried? Mia clearly expected this. She picked up her phone, tapped a few times, and turned the screen toward me. It was a photo from a private gathering. Mia stood in the center, and the man beside her made my pupils shrink, Harold Shaw, founder of Viridian Tech, the largest individual shareholder, long retired and rarely seen in public. She stood close to him, comfortable, familiar. Harold is my uncle. She pulled the phone back, perfectly calm. He stepped back a few years ago, but he's never stopped caring about this company. He sent me to internal audit specifically to clean house. He's backing this investigation 100%. Daniel Moore on the board? He's worked with Harold for decades. He's with us. Our goal is simple: use Hayes as the opening to do a full, deep cleansing of this company. She held my gaze, open and steady. So I'm not here to string you along or use you as bait. I'm asking you to join us in a real fight. For the company's future and for a clean career for people like you. Are you in? I looked into her eyes. I saw resolve there, the kind that doesn't back down, and the quiet confidence of someone fighting on the right side. I took a deep breath, picked up my cold Americano, and drank it down in one go. What do you need me to do? That secret meeting at the cafe was both a shot of adrenaline and a heavy weight around my neck. I knew now just how big of a hornet's nest I'd kicked. I knew I'd been pulled into something far bigger and darker than one corrupt CFO. But at least I wasn't alone anymore. I had Harold Shaw behind me, as quiet and powerful a backer as you could ask for, and I had Mia and her investigation team. The next week was quiet on the surface, churning underneath. A low-key internal announcement went out confirming Hayes' suspension pending investigation, worded carefully, only mentioning serious policy violations. But the broadcast incident had already spread like wildfire through every corner of Viridian. Break rooms, group chats, anonymous forums, everyone had a version of the story. I was suspended but free to move around. Per Mia's instructions, I kept a normal routine but spent most of my days at home, digging through memory and old files for every financial oddity connected to Hayes and his circle. It wasn't easy. I'd only handled pieces of the books, or caught glimpses of disconnected fragments. I had to piece them together like a puzzle, slowly trying to map the shape of what was hidden. I dug up years of work notes, meeting minutes, even old email threads with other departments. Details that had felt off at the time, but that I'd never pushed on re-examined under the assumption of systemic corruption. Every one of them glowed red. For example, marketing ran several large special channel promotion fees every year, processed with almost no paperwork, approved only by Hayes and the former marketing VP, long since departed. Or the overpriced production line procurement had brought in 3 years ago, with absurdly high maintenance costs, from a tiny no-name vendor whose ownership traced back, through several shell layers, to a distant cousin of Theodore Hayes. I mapped it all out in a mind map, red flags, timelines, names, departments, color-coded, question-marked. The web grew bigger and messier the more I worked, and it made my scalp prickle. If even half of it was real, the rot went deeper and wider than I'd ever guessed. Meanwhile, things were moving outside. Wade came back after one day of questioning, gray and defeated. He'd been transferred out of core finance to do busy work in admin. People said he walked around with his head down, avoiding everyone. He knew things, that much was obvious, but with Hayes fallen and the investigation active, he'd chosen to keep his mouth shut and save himself. A senior accountant from audit was temporarily running finance. The work got done, but the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. The managers and supervisors who'd been close to Hayes all walked on eggshells, suddenly very careful about following every rule. And I could feel eyes on me. Sometimes when I went out, I'd get the feeling someone was following at a distance. Once I found my trash can had been rummaged through, not that I'd left anything incriminating in paper form. Once I got a call from an unknown number. Nobody spoke. Just a cold, quiet laugh, then the line went dead. Mia was working nonstop on her end. We communicated through an encrypted messaging app, one-on-one. She'd send me sanitized questions now and then. Was there a payment from such and such trading company booked as tech consulting in this month? Did Hayes ever fast-track or pre-approve certain project budgets unusually quickly? I knew she was cross-referencing her leads with mine. She also warned me repeatedly to be careful, stay home unless necessary, don't talk to anyone suspicious. One afternoon, I was staring at my relationship map on the screen, deep in thought, when my phone buzzed. A single line from Mia. Break in the case. Usual spot, 10 p.m. Come alone. Stay sharp. The usual spot was that quiet book bar near Slow Time Cafe, quiet at night, back exit available. I got there at 9:50, took the corner seat with my back to the wall and a clear view of the door. I ordered a soda water and sipped it slowly, scanning the room. Only a few tables were occupied. Everyone looked normal, reading or talking softly. Nothing out of place. 10:05. Mia wasn't there yet. Not like her, she was always punctual. I sent a quick message. No reply. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I told myself it was traffic or a last-minute delay. 10:15. My phone finally buzzed. Call from Mia. I answered immediately, voice low, hello. It wasn't Mia on the line. It was a young man's voice, tight with panic, breathless, like he was running. Is this Mr. Liam Carter? I froze. I am. Who is this? Where's Ms. Bennett? Tyler, her assistant. There was an accident. We were on our way to meet you, right by the bookstore intersection, and a black SUV came out of nowhere, T-boned us. Her head hit the window. There's so much blood. The SUV just drove off. Car crash. My ears rang. First thought, not an accident. Hit job. Or a warning. Did you call an ambulance? The police? I forced myself to stay calm, to speak clearly. Both. They're almost here. Mr. Carter, right before she passed out, she made me tell you something. His voice dropped to a frantic, shaking whisper. She said, files are in the cloud. Password is your initials plus my start date. Watch for the mole. Then she blacked out. I stopped hearing the rest. Files in the cloud. Password, my initials plus her start date. Watch for the mole. The words hit me like lightning. The evidence. Her case files. The proof. A mole. Inside the investigation team. That's how they knew where she'd be. That's why she'd been run off the road exactly on her way to meet me. Ice water ran straight down my spine. That crash was no accident. It was an attack. Targeted. Meant to stop the investigation cold. Mia was hurt, maybe dying. And the files she'd built, everything they needed to take down the whole ring, were locked in the cloud, and only I had the key. She trusted me with it at the very end, when she had nobody else. But a mole in the team. Who could I trust? Tyler, her assistant? The police? The hospital? And if they'd gone after Mia, would they come for me next? If they knew she was meeting me, did they know where I was? If they couldn't find the files on her, would they come looking for the person she'd given the password to? My head snapped up, scanning the book bar. The couple that had been whispering in the corner booth was gone. The barista behind the counter, someone new, was there now, glancing my way from the corner of his eye. Outside, a black sedan rolled slowly past the window, dark-tinted windows, impossible to see inside. My breath caught. Cold sweat broke out all over my palms. I had to get out of there. Mia had paid for that warning with blood. I wasn't about to waste it. I stood up smoothly, walked at a normal pace to the register, paid. The new barista took my money, made change. Nothing obvious, but I felt his eyes linger on my face half a second too long. Outside, the cold night air hit me and cleared my head a little. I didn't go home. Home might not be safe anymore. I walked aimlessly, checking store windows for reflections behind me. The black sedan didn't reappear, but I couldn't be sure I wasn't being followed. I had to get into that cloud account. Now. It was our only shot at turning this around. It might also get me killed. But I couldn't use my phone or my laptop. They could be traced. I needed a clean machine, a safe place. Then I passed a brightly lit internet cafe. An idea clicked. I pulled my cap lower and walked in. The cafe was smoky, loud with keyboard clacks and shouting gamers. I took the farthest corner station, the one most out of view of the security cameras, and paid cash for a temporary card. I sat down. The old tower hummed to life. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my shaking hands. Which cloud service? She hadn't said. Company server? Too risky if there was a mole. More likely a private, encrypted cloud storage. I thought back. She was careful, security conscious. I remembered once, in a work chat, she'd mentioned a well-known international encrypted storage service, joked that she kept her most sensitive files there safer than in a bank vault. I found the website, downloaded the client, installed it. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it over the cafe noise. My palms were slick with sweat. I kept glancing up, scanning the room. The client opened. Login screen. Username and password required. Username. What would she use? Personal email? Work email? I tried her work email. For the password, I used what Tyler had relayed, my initials, LC, plus her start date at Veridian. I remembered her mentioning once she'd joined 3 years ago, July 18th. So LC0718? I typed it in and hit login. Incorrect password. Wrong format? Full date? She'd said start date usually month and day, but maybe year too? 2-digit year? 4-digit? I steadied myself and tried LC201807118. Incorrect password. For attempts remaining today. My stomach sank. Not many chances left. Too many wrong tries and the account would lock or trigger an alarm. What was it? She'd been dying, basically. She'd have picked something simple, something I'd get right away. My initials plus her start date. Maybe not her Veridian start date. Her start date at the group level? She'd been in group audit before transferring down. That date mattered more to her, professionally. But how would I know that? Wait, could I work backward? Password was my initials plus a date that meant something to her. I'd noticed little things about her, little habits. 3 taps of her finger on her coffee cup. 3rd button fastened on her coat. A tiny number 3 engraved on her pen cap. 733? Wait. July 3rd? March 7th? But what year? No time to overthink. I tried LC0703. Then LC0307. Still wrong. 1 attempt left. My shirt was soaked through with sweat under my arms. The stale cafe air felt thick enough to choke on. I stared at the login box, mind racing. Mia was meticulous, systematic. Her password would be obvious to us, impossible to guess from outside. My initials. Her start date. Suddenly it hit me, sharp and clear. Back when I'd first started at Veridian, in that group onboarding video, the instructor had joked that everyone's internal system ID ended with 6 digits, last 2 of start year, plus month, plus day, default setting. Most people never changed it. If Mia's group ID followed that rule, her real start date was in her system ID. And I'd seen it once. Once, on a shared approval link for a special project, her user ID had been in the URL, Bennett M followed by numbers. I dug through my memory. I'd only glanced. What were the numbers? 160,901? 150,901? 160901, September 1st, 2016. 150901, September 1st, 2015. Which made sense. She looked mid-30s. If she'd joined the group straight out of grad school, mid-20s, either fit. No more time. With shaking fingers, I typed LC160901. I hit enter. The little loading spinner paused. Then the screen changed. Login successful. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried out right there in the noisy cafe. I bit down hard on my lip to stay quiet. I was in. I was inside Mia's secure cloud. Not many files. Neat, organized folders. I found one labeled Veridian Special Investigation encrypted. I clicked it. 2nd password required. I tried dates. I tried code names. Nothing worked. What was the 2nd key? She hadn't had time to say. I tried Harold. Mole. Audit. No. Then I noticed the folder properties. One tiny line of text in the notes field, Night Watch. Night Watch. My breath caught. I typed, Elk Night Watch. Password accepted. The folder opened. Pages of documents, scans, photos, audio clips. All labeled, all sorted. Suspicious payment trails tied to Hayes, side-by-side analyses of inflated vendor contracts, compilations of anonymous tips, even several grainy but intelligible phone call recordings. One of the voices I recognized, low and smooth, one of the most senior, most respected executives at the company. I scanned through them faster and faster, my stomach dropping further with every file. Mia's investigation was far deeper, far more complete than I'd ever imagined. She'd mapped the whole network. She had them. She almost had them. But her notes also made clear the roadblocks, the dead ends, the evidence she couldn't reach because of her access level. I pulled out the encrypted portable drive Mia had told me to keep handy and started copying the core files. They were large. It would take time. I watched the progress bar creep forward, eyes flicking up every few seconds to check the room. Everything still looked normal. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw two men in black jackets walk in the front door. Big, broad-shouldered. They didn't go to the counter. They just stood there, scanning the whole room like searchlights. My heart jumped into my throat. Coincidence? Or were they here for me? I ducked my head, switched to a game window I'd pulled up as cover, and kept very still. Every muscle in my body was coiled tight. They scanned once, then started walking straight toward my corner. Slow, steady. Targeted. Closer. Closer. I could smell cigarette smoke on them from here. The progress bar sat at 70%. Run? The drive was still plugged in. Running would admit I had something to hide. Stay? Wait to be grabbed? They were 3 meters away, about to look directly at my screen when... Hey man! Station 203 just crashed. Get over here. A kid with headphones across the room yelled at the top of his lungs. The attendant swore loudly and stood up, walking right across the two men's line of sight. In that split second, I moved. I ripped the drive out mid-transfer, jammed it into my inner jacket pocket, cleared browser history, killed the cloud client, closed the game, left the desktop blank. Then I picked up my half-empty soda water, stood up like I was heading for the water fountain, and walked steadily toward the back exit, the one I'd scouted on the way in. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I could feel their eyes on my back for a step or two. I didn't look back. I pushed through the back door and slipped into the dark alley. Cold air hit me, thick with the smell of dumpsters. I pressed my back to the cold brick wall and gasped for air. My shirt was soaked through. That had been too close. Way too close. Who were they? Hayes people? The Moles people? How had they found me? Followed me? Tracked the cloud login? Was Tyler trustworthy? Had he leaked it? Questions spun through my head, fast and chaotic. But I didn't have time to unpack them. I patted my chest. The drive was still there, cold and hard and real. I had part of the files. Not all of them, but part. Mia was hurt, maybe dying. There was a traitor in the investigation. They'd tried to kill her to stop this. I was alone out here. I had a drive full of evidence that could burn everything down. And I was now a target. Where do I go? Who can I trust? Police? Not with a mole running around. Not yet. Daniel Moore? He was on Harold's side, but after what happened to Mia, how did I know his people were clean? I huddled in the dark alley, listening to distant traffic, shivering in the cold, feeling utterly alone and hunted. Then I closed my hand tight around the drive in my pocket. No panic. Mia had trusted me with the password, with everything, at the worst moment of her life. I had the key now. I had to get it to someone who could use it. The more desperate they acted, the closer we were. The more scared they were. I pulled out the encrypted burner phone Mia had given me, the one we only used for emergencies. I found the number she'd said was completely off-book, Harold Shaw's personal assistant, direct line. I took a deep breath and dialed. It rang 3 times. A steady, low male voice answered, "Hello. Nightwatch needs backup." I kept my voice low, using the code phrase Mia had given me. Partial files retrieved. Safe house compromised. Nightingale is down. There's a snake in the nest. 2 beats of silence. Then the voice answered, sharp and fast. Understood. Location? Alley behind Time's Up Internet Cafe, off Clearwater Road, Old Downtown. Stay hidden. Gardener is en route. 20 minutes max. Code phrase. The gardenias are blooming beautifully today. Call ended. I slid down the wall to the ground, huddling as deep in the shadows as I could. 20 minutes. The longest 20 minutes of my life. Who is the gardener? Would they get me out of this? Hold on, Mia. Just hold on. The night was long. But the final, deadliest stretch of the game had begun. I squeezed the drive in my pocket like it was a stick of dynamite, one that could blow everything apart, or one that could light the way forward. The dark and the cold of the alley wrapped around me like wet cloth. Every second stretched into forever. Every distant footstep, every car pass, every rustle of a cat in the trash made me flinch. 15 minutes in, it felt like an eternity. Just when I was starting to wonder if I'd imagined the whole call, I heard footsteps at the mouth of the alley. 2 people. Steady, even pace. I tensed. My hand went to the drive in my pocket. It had a physical destroy switch. If things went bad, I'd fry it before they got it. 2 figures stepped into the faint glow of the streetlight at the alley opening. Dark work uniforms, like factory guys getting off shift. Toolboxes in their hands. They didn't walk in right away. One pulled out a lighter and lit a cigarette. For a split second the flame lit his face, mid-40s, ordinary features, but sharp, alert eyes that flicked quickly down the alley. He took a drag and spoke to his partner in a rough, local drawl, loud enough to carry. Hell of a place. Not even a streetlight. Pitch black. The younger one grunted. Tell me about it. Let's hurry. This place reeks. They started walking in. Straight toward my end of the alley. I held my breath, muscles coiled to move. They were 3 or 4 meters from my hiding spot when the older one stopped. He spoke again, half to himself, half to his partner. At least there's some green by the wall. Weeds mostly. He paused, and added in a mild, almost regretful tone, shame, really. Gardenias would be nice. My wife loves them. Says the scent carries for miles. The gardenias are blooming beautifully today, actually. Picked one for her before I left. The gardenias are blooming beautifully today. Code phrase confirmed. All the tension drained out of me at once. I almost collapsed. I pushed myself up from the wall, stiff and wobbly from crouching so long. They noticed immediately and moved in fast, flanking me on either side like it was second nature. The older man gave me a quick, sharp once-over. You hurt? You have the package. I shook my head, then nodded, tapping my inner pocket. Stick with us. Don't say a word. Act natural. He turned and they adjusted their positions, half shielding me as we walked. 3 guys heading home after a shift, nothing to see here. They didn't take me to any main road. We wound through narrow, dark side streets, out the back of an old residential complex. A beat-up silver van was waiting there, mud-spattered, just like every other work van in the city. The older man slid the side door open and waved me in. The interior was dark, stacked with cardboard boxes and tools in the back. I climbed in. They followed. The door slid shut. The van pulled away immediately, smooth and quiet. The younger guy drove. Good driver. Fast, steady, checking the mirrors constantly. The older man sat next to me. He pulled out a small detector, switched it on, and ran it over me and the drive. A faint beep. No trackers. Package is clean. He put the device away. Name's Hank. Harold's driver and security. This is Cole. We know about Ms. Bennett. We're on it. Harold wants to see you. Harold Shaw wanted to meet me in person. I nodded, throat tight. I didn't ask questions. No time for small talk when everything was moving this fast. The van didn't head to any Shaw residence or corporate office I knew. It circled the city a few times, then pulled into an old, quiet government compound. The guard waved us through like he knew the car on site. We stopped in front of a plain gray building. Hank and Cole got out first, scanned the area, then waved me over. We went inside, took a creaky old elevator to the top floor. The whole top floor was one apartment. Heavy security doors swung open to simple, expensive furnishings. An older man with silver hair, sharp-eyed and straight-backed in a silk mandarin collar shirt, sat on a rosewood sofa pouring tea. Harold Shaw. I'd seen photos. He looked up as we walked in. His gaze was calm, deep, like still water. It rested on me for a moment, then he nodded once. Good. Sit down. Hank, pour the young man some hot tea. Calm his nerves. His voice was low, but it carried weight. No small talk. Straight to business. I sat on the side sofa. Hank set a teacup in front of me. Warmth seeped through the porcelain into my hands, chasing a little of the cold and tension away. How's Mia? I asked first. Harold poured another cup, slow and steady. Just got word. She's out of danger, but still unconscious under observation. Concussion, broken left arm. Lucky nothing worse. The car that hit her was a stolen plate vehicle. Police are chasing leads. Preliminary forensics confirm it was intentional. Targeted. So it was attempted murder. My chest ached. But I breathed a little easier knowing she'd live. Mr. Shaw, before she passed out, she sent word through her assistant. Watch for the mole. I kept my voice low. His hand on the teacup paused. A flicker of cold, sharp anger passed through his eyes, gone as fast as it came. I heard. That's why I needed to see you right away. He set the cup down and looked at me. You have the drive? I pulled the portable drive out of my inner pocket and handed it to him with both hands. He took it and passed it directly to Hank, who carried it into the back room, presumably to read it on an air-gapped machine. You've been through a lot, Liam. More than anyone should have to. His eyes rested on me again, half assessing, half approving. Mia was right about you. Principles, backbone, and a cool head when everything falls apart. Rare combination. I just did what I had to do. I was cornered. Corners bring out what's really in a man. He nodded slowly. We've gone through what you sent, and what Mia had compiled. Hayes is just a pawn. Behind him, there's a whole network of kickbacks and embezzlement running through procurement, sales, and upper management. It's big, it's deep, and it's been eating away at this company for years. Our margins aren't down just because of the market. It's these thieves. His voice was calm, but there was ice under it. I could feel the quiet fury. They knew Mia was closing in. Then you blew up Hayes in front of the whole company. They panicked. Hitting Mia was their attempt to behead the investigation. And now, you're next. Because you might have something they're even more afraid of. A cold prickle ran down my neck. Me? I only got part of her cloud files. Part is enough. He cut me off, eyes sharp. Especially when we pair it with your timeline, your connections, the patterns you spotted. It fills in the gaps. Here's the problem. We have leads, we have circumstantial evidence, but to take down the whole ring, we need the final piece. Hard proof that leads straight to the top, bank records, meeting recordings, the works. And we need the mole inside our own investigation team. You have suspects already? He didn't answer directly. The team is handpicked: audit, legal, compliance, plus Mia and my people. Small circle. Very few people had access to her meeting location last night. Hank is running traces now. Hank came back then, holding a folder, his face grim. He leaned down and spoke quietly in Harold's ear, handing over the folder. Harold flipped through it quickly. His brow furrowed deeper and deeper. He closed the folder and was quiet for a long moment. The only sound in the room was the old wall clock ticking. Liam, he said at last, heavier than before, what's on that drive, combined with your earlier leads, is enough to move on several people. But there's an offshore money trail that points to someone we didn't expect. And Mia's last encrypted memo says she thinks they're onto us, planning to move assets and destroy evidence. Possibly as soon as the next 48 hours. He looked at me, eyes bright and intense. We need someone. Someone they won't be watching closely. Someone who can get into a place and retrieve something that could end this whole thing. I sat up straighter. What place? What is it? Tomorrow afternoon, Hayes' mistress, Lisa Marlowe, will go to a villa she owns out in Blue Bay Estates. We believe Hayes kept his most sensitive records there. Original transaction ledgers, hard copies, nothing digital that can be traced. She's going there to either pick them up or destroy them. He spoke slowly, evenly. Police and our people will have the perimeter covered, but we need someone on the inside to get the goods before she does. Someone with a fresh face, someone they won't immediately flag as a threat. I understood. I was the fresh face. To the outside world, I was just the mid-level manager who'd lucked into taking down the CFO, who was now suspended and adrift. They were watching Harold's people, watching the investigators. They weren't watching me. Not yet. Why me? You have professionals for this. Because you're the best fit. The least likely to be connected to us. He was blunt about it. Hank and the others are too well known. They'd be spotted instantly. You're an insider, but a wild card. Your move will catch them off guard. And you know what to look for. You understand financial records. You know what's critical. Most of all, he held my gaze. You stood up to Hayes when you were cornered. You're quick on your feet, and you have the stomach for this. Mia trusted you with the password when it mattered most. It's risky, but we'll have your back the whole way. Are you in? Was I in? Same question Mia had asked me in the cafe. Same answer. There was no choice. I was in too deep. They'd tried to kill Mia. They'd come for me next. The only way out was all the way through. And besides, this was the right thing. This was cleaning out the rot. What do you need me to do? I asked, no hesitation. A flicker of approval crossed Harold's face. He nodded at Hank. Hank laid out a detailed map of Blue Bay Estates on the table. He walked me through the villa layout, likely hiding spots, lease's description, timing, pickup points, extraction plan. It sounded thorough. But I knew plans never survived first contact. Especially if there was a mole feeding information to the other side. Mr. Shaw, I said when he finished, if I get the package or if something goes wrong, how do I know who to trust? How do I tell the gardener from the snake? Harold looked like he'd expected exactly that question. He pulled an old brass pocket watch from his vest, flipped it open. No clock face inside. Just a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman smiling in a gardenia bush. That's my daughter. She passed away 20 years ago. His voice softened, just a little. Only 3 people know about this. Me, Hank, and Mia. Gardenias were her favorite. That code phrase about them blooming? It was ours. If whoever comes for you can show you this watch, or tell you her nickname Lila, then they're one of us. If they can't. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I nodded slowly, memorizing the watch, the name Lila, the flower. Operation goes down at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Get some rest. Be ready. He stood and clapped me on the shoulder, firm and heavy. Take care of yourself, Liam. This company, all the people who work here, they deserve a clean shot. I nodded again. I didn't say anything else. Hank showed me to a guest room. Simple, clean. I lay on the strange bed, wide awake, running tomorrow's plan over and over in my head, imagining every possible thing that could go wrong. Who was the mole? Would the villa be a trap? Was the story about his daughter true? Questions swirled. But I knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow at 3, I would walk into that villa alone. It might hold the proof that won the whole fight. It might hold nothing but trouble. And the only protection I had, besides a backup of the drive, was a code phrase about gardenias and a girl named Lila. At 2:30 the next afternoon, I was on a beat-up electric scooter, wearing a plain courier uniform and a baseball cap pulled low, weaving through traffic toward Blue Bay Estates on the west side of the city. Hank had supplied the uniform, the scooter, the fake plates, and a stack of empty delivery boxes for cover. My objective was clear: get into the villa before Lisa Marlowe arrived, or sneak in after she did, find the original financial records Hayes had hidden there, and get out with them. Per intel, Lisa would drive out alone around 3 o'clock. Police and Harold's people would have eyes on the perimeter. They'd create a small distraction, brief gate system glitch, minor fender bender near the entrance, to pull security and any lookouts away, giving me roughly a 5 to 10 minute window to get inside. I had a tiny earpiece and a button camera hidden on my shirt. Hank's low, steady voice came through the earpiece. Courier, target has left her apartment. ETA 15 minutes to Blue Bay. Perimeter gardeners are in position. Ace Scheme activates in 3 minutes. Gate system glitch. You enter through west service access. Code 7713. 50 yards straight, right at the pool. Target is Villa 7, codename Overlook. Alarm system is muted remotely. Will unlock the back door. Repeat, Villa codename Overlook. Copy that. I kept my voice low. My heart thumped steady and hard in my chest. Strangely, I wasn't that scared. Just focused. Maybe after everything that had happened, after the near miss at the internet cafe, there was a kind of cold calm in just committing to the next move. Blue Bay was upscale, lots of trees and hedges, very private. I turned the scooter down the service and maintenance drive like I belonged there. The guard at the booth was staring at his phone, didn't even glance up at a delivery guy. I punched in 7713. The gate, arm lifted. I rolled through. Following Hank's directions, I found Villa Overlook quickly. Mediterranean style, small front garden, all curtains drawn. Quiet as a tomb. I parked the scooter behind a thick hedge on the side of the house, out of sight, and hurried to the back door. A faint crackle in my earpiece. Then a soft click. The smart lock light went from red to green. I turned the handle. The door opened. A faint smell of dust and old air freshener hit me. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The place was fancy, but unlived in. Cold and quiet. Inside Overlook. All clear so far. Copy. Target ETA 5 minutes. You have 8 minutes max. Prioritize study, master bedroom, any hidden safes or compartments. Hayes collected cigars. Look for a hidden humidor or safe behind it. Decoy. Got it. I swept the living room quickly, then padded up the thick carpeted stairs. Master bedroom and study on the second floor. Priority targets. The study was big, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on one wall, big windows overlooking the yard on the other. I went through desk drawers fast. Nothing but ordinary papers and books. I pulled on a few books on the shelf, old movie trick. Nothing moved. Time ticked away. I moved to the master bedroom. Huge bed, walk-in closet. I checked nightstands, the back of the closet, even the bathroom. Nothing. Had the intel been wrong? Had she already moved everything? Courier, target has entered the neighborhood. Moving slow, she's scoping. Perimeter is running a slow-down distraction. Bought you 1 minute. You have 3 minutes left. 3 minutes. My pulse spiked. My eyes landed on a huge abstract oil painting hanging over the bed. Chaotic, dark, bold colors. Did Hayes strike me as an abstract art guy? I stepped closer. The frame looked normal at first, but it was thicker than it should be. I ran my finger along the side edge of the frame, near the bottom right corner. There was a tiny, almost invisible dark circle, perfectly disguised as a wood knot. A fingerprint sensor? A button? Master bedroom. Bottom right of the painting frame. Found a hidden contact point. Try triggering it. Pressure or fingerprint. We have Hayes prints on file, trying remote simulation. We need physical contact. Hank's voice was tight fast. Physical contact. I didn't have tools. No time. I glanced at the vanity. Lisa's makeup was spread out there. I grabbed a pair of fine-point metal tweezers, pressed the tip against the little circle. Nothing. I traced around the edge of the circle with the tweezers. Click. Barely audible from inside the wall. The whole painting, heavy frame and all, rotated silently inward about 30 degrees. Behind it, set into the wall, was a square metal safe, combination dial plus electronic fingerprint lock. Found it. Wall safe behind the painting. Good. But we don't have the combination. Forcing it will trigger an alarm and could destroy what's inside. Time's up. Target is at the front door. I heard it then. Car engine cutting out in the driveway. The click of heels on gravel. Lisa was here. Cold sweat broke out all over me. Run for the back door now? Maybe make it, but I'd leave empty-handed. Hide? The house was big, but not that big. If she noticed anything off, I'd be trapped. In a split second, I made the call. My eyes darted to the big four-poster bed. Floor-length bed skirt hanging to the carpet. Hiding. I'll make my move when I can. I breathed the words into the mic and slid under the bed fast. Dusty, cramped. I held my breath and angled the button camera so I could see the bedroom door and the safe through the gap under the bed skirt. Barely a second later, the bedroom door opened. Black stiletto heels clicked across the carpet. I only saw her from the knees down, tight black dress, long legs, tense, hurried steps. She walked straight for the painting. Damn it. Why is this open? I heard her hiss, low and furious. She'd noticed the frame was ajar. She knelt down in front of the safe. I saw her ankles shift position as she spun the dial fast, then pressed her thumb to the fingerprint reader. 2 soft beeps. A heavy clunk of bolts retracting. She pulled the safe door open. From my angle, I watched her reach inside and pull out a thick manila envelope and a small black external drive. She let out a sharp, relieved breath, stuffed both into her designer handbag, slammed the safe shut, and pushed the painting back into place. Less than a minute, start to finish. She had it. She was leaving with it. My chest tightened. If she walked out that door with the originals, we might never get them back. Do I take her? Physically? Maybe not. And it would blow the whole operation. Security would swarm. Then, just as she turned to leave the bedroom. WCOO. Asterisk. A deafening fire alarm blared to life all through the house. Strobe lights flashed red on the ceiling. Lisa yelped and stumbled, nearly dropping her bag. Perimeter support. They'd triggered the fire alarm remotely. Chaos. Distraction. My window. She cursed loudly, clapped a hand over one ear, and hurried out of the bedroom toward the front door, clearly planning to evacuate the burning house. The second her footsteps faded down the hall, I rolled out from under the bed and launched myself at the painting. I'd seen the combination. Not perfectly, she'd been in the way a little, but I'd seen the final positions of the dial. I'd seen exactly where she'd pressed her thumb. And when the alarm had startled her, she'd rested her hand on the side of the frame for half a second, maybe resetting something, maybe a secondary trigger. No time to think. I had to bet. I spun the dial to the numbers I'd memorized. Later I'd learn they were Hayes and Lisa's anniversary, pressed my thumb hard against the fingerprint pad in roughly the same spot. Beep, beep, beep. Unlocked. The alarm drowned out the sound. I wrenched the door open. Mostly empty. But tucked in the back corner, in a clear plastic bag, was one tiny silver USB stick. A handwritten label on it, in Hayes' handwriting, asterisk final backup. LC star. LC, my initials? Or something else? Either way, it felt like a sign. I stuffed it in my pocket, slammed the safe, pushed the painting back. 15 seconds, start to finish. The alarm was still wailing. Security would be here any second. Neighbors would have called it in. I had to go. Now. Not down the stairs. Straight out. I ran for the bedroom balcony. Open rail, 10, 11 feet down to the lawn below. No time to hesitate. I swung one leg over the rail, aimed for the thick holly bush below, and jumped. Thud, rough landing. A sharp twinge in my ankle, but the bushes softened most of it. I pushed myself up, limping fast for the big tree at the property line, the blind spot Hank had marked, where pickup would be waiting. I was just hauling myself over the back wall when I heard shouting from the front of the house, security guards, Lisa's high, angry voice. I dropped to the dirt on the other side. An unmarked gray sedan glided silently up to me. Rear door flew open. Get in. Hank. I dove inside. Door slammed. The car pulled away smooth and fast. Inside, Hank rode shotgun, Cole drove. Hank turned to me, eyebrows raised, questioning. I was gasping for breath. I pulled the dusty little silver USB out of my pocket and handed it over, then tapped my ear, alarm still ringing in my ears. Hank plugged the stick into a portable encrypted reader and skimmed through it. His face went from serious to surprised to grim, with a flicker of cold satisfaction. That's it. Hayes insurance policy. Full original ledgers, encryption keys, and a backup recording of a conversation he had with someone. He took a deep breath and looked me dead in the eye. You did it, Liam. This plus Mia's files? It's over. And it names the mole, codename, and everything. Who? I breathed. Hank didn't answer me directly. He keyed his comms. All gardeners, target mole is confirmed. Execute B-plan. Apprehend target, Claire Sutton. Board Secretariat. Claire Sutton. It hit me like a punch to the chest. Claire, the board secretary. The woman who'd walked into Hayes' office that first day, so official, so serious. The woman who'd handled the initial investigation. It had been her all along. That's how they'd known Mia's meeting location. What about the stuff Lisa took? I asked suddenly. Decoy. Also evidence. Police are on her tail. She'll lead them straight to Hale's people. Hank's mouth twisted in a cold smile. Perfect. We wrapped this up with a bow. The car sped back toward the safe house. I leaned back against the seat, ankle throbbing, adrenaline draining out of me, leaving hollow exhaustion in its place. The biggest bomb was about to drop. Back at the safe house, Harold was waiting. When he saw us walk in and saw the silver USB drive in Hank's hand, the tight line of his shoulders relaxed just a little. His tech team went to work immediately, decrypting and extracting everything on the drive. What they found was worse than any of us had guessed. Not just complete original records of all the fake books, shell contracts, kickback schedules, and encryption keys. There was also a clear audio recording. Hayes on a call with someone he called Boss, reporting that the books were clean, that Claire Sutton had Viridian audit tied up so they'd never dig deep. The boss told him to move the last of the money through the old channels, lay low until the heat died down. Voice analysis confirmed it beyond any doubt. The boss was Victor Hale, executive vice president in charge of procurement and sales. A 20-year veteran of the company, well-liked, widely respected, famous for being calm and gentlemanly. And the line about Claire Sutton confirmed she was the mole inside the investigation, feeding information and covering for Victor and Hayes. There was also an encrypted spreadsheet listing offshore shell companies and Hayes' personal hidden assets, his escape plan, and probably his insurance policy against Victor, too. Ironclad. Harold didn't hesitate. He made the calls himself. One set went through secure channels to law enforcement and corporate compliance. The other went to Daniel Moore and his allies on the board to prepare the internal cleanup. That same night, officers moved in. They picked up Victor Hale at a high-end country club, mid-dinner, on charges including commercial bribery, embezzlement, and money laundering. Another team picked up Claire Sutton at her home. Police pulled Lisa Marlowe over mid-drive, on her way to meet Victor's people, with the decoy evidence in her bag. The shockwave hit Viridian Tech like an earthquake. Next morning, a joint announcement from Group HQ and Viridian went out company-wide. EVP Victor Hale, former CFO Theodore Hayes, and Board Secretary Claire Sutton had all been taken into custody on suspicion of serious financial crimes. The company was cooperating fully with authorities. Harold Shaw would take over interim leadership. A special task force would conduct a full internal review and rebuild the company's compliance and risk systems from scratch. Men who'd seemed untouchable, who'd run the place like their own personal bank, were in cuffs overnight. Managers and supervisors with ties to Victor and Hayes went pale. Some came forward voluntarily. Others were suspended. The whole rotten network, built over years, got pulled up by the roots. A week later, Mia was released from the hospital. Her left arm was still in a cast, but she looked sharp and energized. She came to see me first thing. "Nice work, Liam." She smiled, eyes bright. "Cool under pressure. Uncle Harold was right about you. None of this happens without your work or Harold's support." I meant it. Without Mia building the case, without her risking everything and getting that password to me, without Harold's weight behind the whole operation, one angry manager with a phone call would never have toppled any of it. "Modesty doesn't suit you." She laughed softly. "The board's seen everything you did, you know? Daniel Moore especially. He says you don't just have integrity, you have the instincts to navigate chaos, and you're loyal. That's irreplaceable in audit and risk." I caught the undercurrent immediately. After everything that went down, we need to rebuild finance from the ground up. Trust and principle come first. Her smile faded, serious again. "Harold and Daniel want you to head up the Special Investigations Office at Group Audit. You'd report directly to me, equivalent rank to Deputy Director. You'd lead the cleanup, help rebuild our controls, and run targeted audits across the whole group. It's a big job. A lot of pressure. Think of it as internal affairs for the company. Are you up for it?" Head of Special Investigations. Directly to the audit director. Deputy director level. Not just getting my job back. A massive promotion. From suspended manager to one of the key oversight roles in the whole group. I knew what it meant. Authority. Responsibility. More scrutiny, more enemies. But also a real chance to fix things, to guard the line, to make sure this didn't happen again. I didn't hesitate long. After everything I'd walked through, I knew exactly where I stood. I'm in. Thank you for the trust and the opportunity. Good. She nodded, satisfied. Before the official announcement, though, there's one last thing we need to do together. All-hands meeting. Closing act for the whole mess. There was a sharp glint in her eye. The company owes its people a clear, public answer. And you're going to be front and center. 3 days later, the all-hands meeting filled the main auditorium. The air was heavy, tense, expectant. Harold, Daniel Moore, the new interim executives, and Mia, arm still in a sling, sat on the stage. Below them, row after row of employees, murmuring, watching, hundreds of faces. Daniel Moore opened the meeting. He laid out the confirmed facts of the case, as much as was publicly allowed, and stated clearly that the company had zero tolerance for corruption. Then Harold spoke, brief but powerful. He spoke plainly about the damage the corruption had done, thanked the employees who'd stood on principle, and laid out the full reform plan. Then Mia took the stage. She gave a short summary of the audit team's work, and then she said, "Throughout this investigation, one member of our finance team stood his ground. He refused illegal orders under enormous pressure, and he came forward with critical information that helped us uncover the full scope of what was happening." The spotlight hit me, front row center. Every eye in the room turned to me. I took a deep breath, walked up the steps to the stage at Mia's gesture, and took the microphone she held out. "Liam," she said, as the employee who stood his ground through all this, "do you have anything to say to everyone here?" I held the mic. My palms were a little damp, but my voice was steady. "Thank you, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Moore, Ms. Bennett." I bowed my head slightly to the stage, then turned to the crowd. Honestly, standing up here feels strange. A month ago, I was just another finance manager, showing up every day, trying to get the numbers right, trying not to make mistakes. I never expected to end up here like this. The room was quiet. When Mr. Hayes put those falsified numbers in front of me, I was scared. Scared to lose my job, scared of retaliation, scared I'd never work in this city again. I was tempted, too. The incentives were huge. I think a lot of people in this room would have felt the same pull, in my shoes. There were small nods here and there. But what pushed me to hit that button wasn't some heroic impulse. It was simpler than that. I was scared of what would happen if I said yes. Scared of ending up in handcuffs, having to face my family. Scared of lying awake every night, guilty. Scared of building my whole career on sand. My voice rose a little, carried clearly across the auditorium. In this line of work, your integrity is your lifeline. Cross that line, and you can never go back. I didn't want to live that way. People say I was stupid or impulsive, that I threw my career away. Maybe. But today, this company gave me a new role, a bigger responsibility, and their trust. It makes me believe that at Viridian, at any company that wants to last, people who stand on principle might take the long road, but they never run out of road. And people who cut corners? They might get away with it for a while, but eventually, there's nowhere left to run. I paused, looked out over the crowd, and said the line I'd turned over in my head so many times. You can balance the books on a spreadsheet. You can never balance the books in your own head. You can fool the system, you can fool the auditors, but you can't fool that cold sweat that wakes you up at 3 in the morning. You can't outrun the consequences forever. Instead of spending all your time making the numbers look pretty on paper, do the work right the first time. Make every number stand up to any scrutiny. That's how you protect your career. That's how you protect this company. Silence for a beat. Then applause started, scattered at first, then rolling, then filling the whole room loud and long. I saw several people from finance clapping hard, their faces bright. I saw people from other departments nodding, thinking. I knew one speech wouldn't change everyone. But I hoped it planted a seed. A little more respect for the line. A little less willingness to look the other way. Mia took the mic back, closed out the meeting, and read my new appointment into the record. The meeting ended on a complicated but broadly hopeful note. As I walked off the stage, I caught sight of Wade King, hiding behind a pillar at the very back of the room. He wouldn't meet my eye. He hunched his shoulders and hurried out. His fate would be decided by HR, but his days at Viridian were clearly numbered. And mine? They were just starting on a whole new road. 2 months later, the cases against Victor Hale, Theodore Hayes, Claire Sutton, and the rest were working their way through the courts. Justice would take its course. At Viridian, under Harold and Mia's leadership, the overhaul was in full swing, transparent, checked and balanced approval workflows for finance and procurement, stricter internal audit and risk systems, cleanouts of every department touched by the corruption network. It was painful, it was messy, but the air in the company felt cleaner. I officially took over as director of the Special Investigations Office. We built the team from scratch, every person vetted carefully. My job, essentially, was to lead a small tactical unit digging into risk points across the business, old legacy issues, big new projects, anything that smelled off. It was high-pressure work. I ran into pushback, open and quiet, all the time. But with Harold and Mia fully behind me, and with the reputation I'd earned from the broadcast and the villa operation, we made steady progress. I found I was good at it. There was something deeply satisfying about following the threads through messy numbers and untangling the truth. Mia and I worked well together. She set strategy and direction. I ran the field work. She joked sometimes that I was her sharpest, most reliable scalpel. My dad's health had stabilized with treatment. My sister's tuition was no longer a constant weight. With back pay and my new salary, I rented a bigger, nicer apartment closer to the office. Life was settling into something steadier, better. Some nights, quiet, I'd think back to that afternoon in Hayes' office, his angry face, the words company-wide all hands glowing red on my phone, the blaring fire alarm in the villa, the cold silver USB stick in my pocket. Moments that had rerouted my whole life. I asked myself sometimes, if I could go back, would I do it all again? I think I would. It wasn't heroism. It was just the last stand of an ordinary guy whose back was to the wall. I'd just gotten luckier than most people in that position. And I'd refused, stubbornly, to go along with it. The world could use a little more of that kind of stubbornness. Yesterday, I walked past the old finance floor. A few former coworkers waved me over, greeted me warmly, called me Director Carter. There was no more wariness, no more distance. Just genuine respect. One quiet young accountant I'd barely spoken to before slipped me a pack of throat lozenges and mumbled, "Director Carter? That speech you gave?" I wrote it down. Thanks. It warmed me more than I'd expected. Today after work, Hank found me and said Harold wanted to see me at his tea room. No work talk. Just tea. How do you like the tea, Liam? Harold poured slowly, carefully. Excellent. Great aftertaste. I meant it. Life's a bit like tea, you know. He watched the leaves unfurl in the hot water, voice slow and thoughtful. First steep? It's strong, sometimes bitter. Like everything you just went through. But you skim off the foam, the impurities, you let it steep properly. That's when you get the real depth. The sweetness. That's where you are now. Second steep. Third. The best parts. I thought about that. Now that you're higher up, more eyes are on you. Before, the threats were out in the open. Now, they'll be quieter. Sweeter. Bribes, favors, soft compromises. His gaze was steady, serious. This office of yours? It rubs people the wrong way. But it's also the company's immune system. I'm trusting you with it. That's trust, and it's a test. Remember 2 things. First, respect the rules. They're your shield, and they're your compass. Second, remember why you stood up in the first place. Hold on to that. Always. I will, sir. I nodded, quiet and serious. I left the tea room as the sun was setting. The evening air was cool and clean. I pulled out my phone. An old college friend had texted me after seeing the news about the Viridian case. Dude, Liam Carter, secret badass? For real though, that line about balancing the books in your head hit me hard. I've had some moments at my job lately. Not anymore. Taking notes from you. I smiled a little and put the phone away. The skyline glowed ahead of me, building lights winking on one by one. The city was full of stories, every single day. Quiet ones, loud ones, ones in the light, ones in the dark. I was glad, so glad, that at that one terrible, perfect crossroads, I'd listened to that small, stubborn voice in my head. I'd taken the harder road. The one that let me sleep at night. I'd keep walking it, too. With respect. And with hope.